Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, non-binary, distinguished guests, welcome to Ridiculous, the Life of a Clown.
My name is Dan Griffiths. I just want to start off by saying thanks, Abraham, for doing this. I think it's a really important thing to put something out in the world that educates people about what clowns are. Besides, you know, the books that people go to read and things, those people are usually already nerds for clown.
Well, and I want to know what's going on inside people's heads. I want to know how people think about the work that they do. It's been my experience with everything I've ever made. And that I want something, like, I want a bunch of clowns to walk in that door of my bar right now in a big parade. And they're not going to. And it doesn't exist unless I make it exist. So I have to go make it exist. It's almost everything that I've ever created has been a product of me wanting it to exist, and no one else has gotten around to it yet. And this is just someone getting around to it. So now it's happening.
Yeah, I think will is important. You will things into existence.
So, again, you talked who you are, but what do you do?
My name is Dan Griffiths. I'm a clown. I'm a teacher and a theater maker and a physical theater practitioner. Yeah, all those things. I spend a lot of time teaching. I have recently, for about the past 10 years, a great deal of time teaching and doing a lot of educational things, and now I'm keeping those things going, but I'm also starting to make more work. And
oh, that's great.
Yeah, I'm embarking on a series of collaborations to create some new work.
So some of the things you have done are the Big Apple Circus Clown Care Unit, is that right?
Yeah, I used to work for the Big Apple Circus Clown Care Unit when I was living in Chicago and working as a clown. Chicago's really different than San Francisco in terms of how, at least in the 90s, how it thought about clown, because one of the major things that happened was this group came out called Clown, spelled with a K, and their troupe was called Die Hanswurst, which means like Jack Sausage or like the assholes. And they pretended to be a clown troupe from Germany to get the newspapers to pay attention to them. Because if you were, you know, just local stuff, people didn't come to your shows that much. So they did this thing. And so I went to their show. I didn't know. I thought they were from Germany. And I'm watching it. As soon as I started watching it, I'm like, they're not from Germany. They're pretending. But how wonderful is that? And the actual work that they made was so fantastic that I just came back every night. I started stalking them. And then I was like, okay, this one guy in the show, he's the brains behind this thing, and his name is Joel Jeske, and now he's a clown for Big Apple Circus.
That's great.
And eventually I hooked up with him, and we created a show called Hats on Fire, Shoes on Fire that culminated in the finale of having flaming top hats and flaming shoes, and we ran that show for a long time. But previous to that, most of my training was in mime, because I was a student at the School for Mime Theater.
How did you get interested in mime? What drew you there?
When I was in college, I was about to graduate from my undergrad working on theater, and I had always really gravitated toward the physical work. And my teacher, you know, they always put up little announcements around the office and whatever, and I saw this announcement for a school called the Goldston and Johnson School for Mimes. That's what it was called, and I thought that was a really funny name. And I looked it up, and they had like full brochure, you know, beautiful thing, and it was taught by this guy Greg Goldston, which is kind of, if America has a foremost mime, it would be this guy. And he had studied with Marceau and also with Richmond Shepard out of LA, and with Noe Zavala. Noe Zavala was one of Greg's first teachers way a long time ago, and Noe's actually local here in San Francisco. And Greg had a school, and it was really vibrant. It only happened in the summertime. Sometimes it was 10 weeks long. Sometimes it was 6 weeks long. But everybody would converge there, study all summer, and then go make all kinds of crazy work all year long. This was before the NEA completely tanked out. The NEA tanked out while I was at mime school. I think I was like a sophomore in college. But yeah, when there used to be more arts funding in the United States, there was a lot more things like that. Like now, everything has to be, you know, to the grindstone.
Or have a big for-profit arm to keep it functional.
That's a thing that happens to a lot of not-for-profit organizations, because like people want to form a theater company or they want to form an entity. And I have experience doing this exact same thing. I've had 2 not-for-profit organizations. You make one because you want to be autonomous and be able to run your own thing. But you really need to be partnered to a larger organization unless you want to make your entire career about running that not-for-profit organization. So that happens a lot. And then fundraising and all that is then even more work. And for small not-for-profits, they just can't do all that. They really need to be partners. That's one cool thing about San Francisco that's different from Chicago is San Francisco has a lot of arts incubators where you can jump in there and be like, hey, here's my fledgling theater company. And they'll be like, great, make some stuff and we'll be your, your umbrella and help you do that. That doesn't or didn't exist so much. It barely did when I was in Chicago in the 90s.
So you went to the mime school.
I went to the School for Mime Theater, and then later on I was a teacher there. That's where I met Stephen Chips, the man who then years later, when I started getting into clown and after I'd made a show with the Hanswurst, I wanted to make a clown show. And so I went to Goldston's house. He actually was living in Chicago at that time. And I told him what I wanted to do. And he was like, okay, let's call Chips. So we called up Chips and flew him in and we started working on the Kaput show. And then we toured that show for like 7 years all around the country.
That's great. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's crazy. That's right before I came here.
So how did you end up in Big Apple Clown Care? Because Big Apple Clown Care leads to Clown Zero eventually.
Yeah, because
so I think it's important to get to the roots of that.
When I was in Chicago and I was doing clown stuff and I worked with the Hanswurst and another person from the mime school who's an amazing clown, Pamela Chermansky, she said, hey, you should audition for this thing. And I said, I don't want to be a clown in the hospital. And she said, come on, just audition for it. So I auditioned. Well, I got in that year and she didn't, which is a bummer. So then the next year, she auditioned again, and all the clowns that were already in the program were like, you better pick her. And because she's so good. And so Pam got in, and then I kind of also wasn't really going to do it. And there was this clown there at the time named Chuck Stubbings, and Chuck said, you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be nice. Like humanitarian clowning or like medical clowning, it doesn't have to be that you're all sunshine and smiles. And I didn't understand what he was talking about. I was like, well, how can it not be? I didn't get it. And he said, come along on the auditions and I'll show you. And we went into a room together, and it was in like a elder care facility. And there was a man in a chair, and the man said, I don't want to be in here anymore. This is a crummy place. And Chuck said, yeah, this place is crummy. And the guy's like, yeah, this is an awful place. They're like, yeah. And that became the game. And that became the way for the man to connect, that the clowns were going to help him complain about something that he didn't like. So then, that eventually became us getting people and complaining to them and like doing all this stuff and really making the guy feel heard. And it was a great lesson in clown, because that is the whole game, is how do you create a game? How do you become complicit with your audience, whether it's a person on a gig or a person in a bar or wherever you're clowning? I mean, I went on some trips with Patch Adams, and I had always heard, oh, this is going to be crazy, bunch of tie-dyed wackos running around. And through Clown Conservatory, Lars Adams, Patch's son, was one of our students. So I met Lars and got to know Lars and got to know Patch, and then went on a trip with them and watched even people that didn't have a ton of training, if they go into like a humanitarian clowning situation, as long as they know the parameters of what they're allowed to do, and they follow their heart, they know how to connect to other people. And the clown aspect of it is just something that engenders them and empowers them to then just approach anyone. So like if you and I dressed up like clowns right now and we went outside, we'd start talking to everyone. We go into stores and start talking to everyone. And that's exactly how it works. Like a kind of human glue, or a thing that binds communities together, because somebody actually steps out and goes, hey, we're all just here doing some stuff. Probably won't live too long. Better connect with these guys. Oh, hi, what are you doing? And it starts to be sort of like human glue.
So after Kaput,
yeah,
Kaput brought you to San Francisco? How did you? What happened?
I actually came to San Francisco. I was in Chicago doing a bunch of stuff. I had done some work with 500 Clown and worked with different companies there, and that theater community and that part of the country just, you know, I started to get kind of bored. And so I had a production company that I handed over to one of our other Kaput clowns, Jim Williams. He was the third that we added to our show. Now he's a clown in Poland. And I enrolled in graduate school because I wanted to be a teacher at university. And I wanted to continue my studies in a more like contained environment. And there was a program here in San Francisco that it's really, really a shame that is gone. It was called the Experimental Performance Institute. And it was part of New College of California, which was over there on Valencia, which was birthed out of California Institute of Ventricle Studies, which is still here and thrives.
New College was a shame.
It kind of
when it went belly up, it screwed a lot of people over.
Yeah,
a lot of people got to get a degree real fast when it went under, but a lot of people got real screwed.
And some people didn't have to pay. They got their student loans reversed who had been there. But you know what happened? I mean, just quickly in a nutshell, what happened to that school is a man who eventually would become a convicted murderer. A man tricked the school. He duped the school into thinking he was a prince from a country, and he was going to give a bunch of money to their school, and so they gave him grades for money and got caught and lost their accreditation. And the program that I went to was inside of that school. There was like an institute, and it was called the Experimental Performance Institute, and it was amazing. It was taught by like Dwayne Calizo and Erica Shuck and Sarah Kraft and all these people like from the area. And it was such a neat program because the year previous to that, I had gone to the Del Arte school and did their PTP program. And when I left there, I get to EPI and they're like, okay, in the next 3 months, you're going to create a solo show. And you just had to make your own show. And you had to show every Friday what you were working on, which is the same model that the mime school used to run on. Every night at the mime school, you had to come to lab with a whole new piece that you'd created in the last 24 hours. So I love that. I love that kind of pressure.
So skipping ahead a bit, when you took over the second incarnation of the Clown Conservatory, did you bring that same kind of methodology to it? Yeah,
we did have labs for a while, and we had with one of the first 4 weeks or 5 weeks we built labs, and the labs were open to the public, which I wouldn't necessarily do again because that puts pressure on the teachers and everything, you know, to make it a show. It's like a show, but a lab is a lab. That's a different thing, and it has to be looked at that way. So the clowns would show each week. I mean, even when the whole time that Joe Diefenbacher and I ran the Clown Conservatory, we always had assignments that the students were fulfilling. I mean, I think everybody who would run that would, I don't know what else they would do. So we always had assignments that the students would fulfill and then show. Sometimes they were open to the public and sometimes not.
So how long were you and Joe together at the Clown Conservatory?
I think we ran the Clown Conservatory for 5 years, which is interesting because Jeff ran it for, I think, 10 years. Yeah. And then we ran it for 5 years. And that was fun. That
was a very different beast under you guys, though. I mean, before it had been like almost a year-long program. It was like 9 months, 5 days a week. But did yours start off?
Yeah, with a series of workshops, Jeff started his off with some grant funding. He had got an important grant, and that really helped it begin. And it was also a different time of the world. Joe and I decided to do shorter increments, because our idea was to attract people that are already working artists that want to beef up their skills and also create new work. One of the things that is great about that is sometimes that happens. That's how we got Derek Gilday. And he's one of the people I collaborate with now. We just closed a show in San Diego. We just finished it last weekend. We did 2 sold-out nights of The Young Matador, which is a show that we created together. That in it essentially is a clown show, but no one would know that doesn't understand clown. They would just go, "Oh, that was a funny show." It's amazing
how much of our work is Sub Rose is on the down low because people just don't like that appellation. They don't want to hear clown. They don't want to
Right.
be associated with clown. They don't want to go see clown.
Well,
But
one of the
physical
reasons,
comedy is fine.
yeah, physical comedy, or one time when I was in Chicago and I was a mime before I was a clown, so I was already used to, like, people are like, oh, mimes, ugh, I don't want that. And the same reason that people don't like mimes, I believe, it's my opinion, is the same reason that sometimes people misunderstand mimes and clowns, and they kind of, like, don't want that to be around them. One is, in America, everybody wants to be the idea of a thing, and nobody wants to be the actual thing. You want to look successful, but you don't want to actually do the work to be successful. You just want to be the guy that already made a hit movie, but you don't want to make the movie. You don't want to do the work that it takes to do that. You just want the trappings of success. And so in America, people just throw some makeup on and run outside and go, I'm a clown. Or, like, you can call yourself a clown. It doesn't matter what you're doing. I don't want to take anything away from anybody. I want them to also be, like, empowered by that.
Oh, I don't.
By that mask. I want them to take that mask and go out and do what they can do in the world. But people should understand that there are as many different kinds of clowns as there are crackers. There are so many kinds of clowns.
And it's weird that so many clowns are crackers.
That's true.
Yeah, that's
and they are. They totally are.
The lack of people of color in our field is pretty major. But that had to be different in Chicago. Yeah. Isn't that where Universal Circus comes from?
I don't know.
No, maybe they're Atlanta. I thought they were Chicago. Maybe they're Atlanta.
Maybe.
It is that show is almost, that entire circus is almost entirely people of color. If not entirely people of color. It's an amazing show. That's great. They have big cats. I don't like that. I'm totally in favor of animals and circuses. I don't have a problem with that. But big cats.
Oh, I thought you said they had a big cast. I was like, why didn't you like a big cast, Abraham? That makes a big audience.
Big cats. They had big cats, and I didn't feel that was. That was. I don't like big cats in a show. I don't feel they're safe.
Yeah,
for the performer, for the audience, for the cats, it just doesn't feel safe at any point.
That's an interesting thing that you bring up about, like, the connection to circus, because I come to clown through the theater. And so did Joe Diefenbacher. We're both trained. We were both partially, part of our training came from the Del Arte School, which is training as clown as one of the many theatrical territories, and not what's normally attached to a circus, where the clown has to, it's a totally different job. And in Chicago, when De Hansvers decided to call their thing Clown with a K, they also coined this phrase, which became the word for it, clown theater. And in Chicago, there was, like, a whole branch of theater just made by clowns, and using the same elements of comedy and things like that, and some of the trappings of what we think of as
I think most of the
circus
clowns in the Bay Area, most of the clowns that have come out of the conservatory system, I think most, in my opinion, are theatrical clowns. But I mean, part of that is just is it dearth or surfeit? Dearth is a lack. Anyway, the lack of availability of circus jobs. Right. I mean, there's I went up for Cirque. I had like 4 callbacks before I blew it entirely. And a number of Clown Conservatory students have gone on to do Cirque. A few have gone to do Ringling, but Ringling's gone now. I mean, they don't exist anymore.
Yeah, Rebecca did Ringling. She came through our She came through our Clown Conservatory.
Lorena Iacocca, Koi Duncan, Oscar, who was many years before me, Nathan Hulgeen's partner,
Nathan,
Michelle Musser.
She's in the circus in Finland.
Yeah, and they all kind of got their career start doing Ringling.
Yeah,
I don't know the career start, but that was their major circus time, was at Ringling.
I really love that Rebecca and Faye got married, and Fable and Rebecca are now the clown and the what do you call it when you do aerial? You hang by your hair.
I can't remember.
A hair hanger person, and they work in the Lewis and Clark Circus now.
Good for them.
I just love to see that, because I mean, Fable was at New College of California, was at Experimental Performance Institute, and just wanted to be a clown. And so, after a lot of work and struggle, eventually got that thing that he wanted, which I love.
I'm glad he managed to make it work.
Yeah, it's tricky. Almost no one does.
They are a good pair. I worked with her in day jobs for a little while, and I can definitely see how they mesh well.
Yeah, I love it. I like to see, like, Amika and David that went through. I think David went through the old one and the new one. He came and took Clown with Joe and I, and Amika Hunter. They just played in Florida like 2 days ago or last night or something with another version of their flying show.
Oh, that's great. Their flying show?
What's that called? They have 2 shows. The first one, they're aviators, and then the second show,
they're not doing acrobatics in the air. They're doing a flying themed show.
Yeah, they also do some acrobatics. They're really good. The clip that I saw was Amika on David's shoulders, and he was riding on one of those wheeled things that you zoom around on with
hoverboards.
Yes.
So
thanks, Abraham.
Hooking
me up with it.
Jumping back a little bit from, I don't know, before, after the Clown Conservatory, where does Clown Zero fall in your timeline?
When I came out here, let's see, I went to Experimental Performance Institute. Then I would regularly come into the old Clown Conservatory. Jeff would bring me in to teach medical clowning to the clowns, and I would come in and teach medical clowning to them, and also just do some clown exercises and things like that. And I'm eternally grateful to Jeff for that, because it really got me in there and made me teach more. And then the more I did it, the more it was like the thing I wanted to continue to explore, especially after coming out of Del Arte and EPI and doing so much schooling. When you get a chance to actually start to work with some people, it's really fun. So my hat's off to Jeff for that. It was great for him to bring me in there. And then because of the Clown Conservatory's nearness to UCSF, I had gone up to meet with UCSF one time as an emissary of the Big Apple Circus, just to see if they were interested in having a medical clown program, because when I was in Chicago, that was my job, my day job. And when I came out here, there really wasn't one. And Jeff hadn't started his yet, so there really didn't exist one. And so I went up to UCSF and talked to them and said, hey, have you ever talked to Big Apple Circus? Are you interested in medical clowns? Do you like that kind of stuff? And had a little meeting with them, didn't hear back from them. Like almost a year later, they contacted me and said, yeah, we want to do this thing. And at that time, I told Jeff I was going to do that and make a thing at UCSF. And he was like, I don't know if you should do that. I mean, Big Apple Circus is a little, like not all that happy, because like clowns would go out and start their own medical programs. And Big Apple Circus didn't like that. But, other people can also sell hamburgers. So I went out and did that, and then Jeff ended up forming one too, and that was great. And now the Bay has more of that kind of thing. The thing about doing it at UCSF, it's different than how the Medical Clown Project works, like where they work in a bunch of different hospitals and stuff. Like we are exclusively the clown artists that work at UCSF in a bunch of different capacities. So we do go room to room, but they also create and collaborate with us on special projects. So recently we created a television program that was filmed live in the Child Life playroom, but then it's because their new hospital is completely state of the art. It's beamed into everybody's room, and the kids in their rooms played an interactive game with us through the main playroom, so we could reach children that were in contact isolation and things where the clowns usually can't go. And everybody saw us. I mean, we 400 people saw us, and we just went once a week and did that. And now we're currently working in development with them. We want to flip the script. Instead of being I'm in my bed and a clown comes in and does some fun stuff and plays with me, and I feel better and I get all those medical benefits. We want to flip it. We want to have people come into the rooms, and we're not going to be clowns. We're not going to look like clowns. We're not any of that kind of thing. We're going to come in as theater artists and interface with the kid to facilitate the creation of something that the kid creates. Yeah. So the kid's going to create a thing, a performance, or write a part of depending on what their abilities are, write something or create something or do a moment of something, and then we're going to help them put that together into a performance. Because, UCSF likes to be on the cutting edge of if there's a thing and it's understood and everybody knows what it is, they're like, what else can you do? How can you do that different? How can you do it better? So that's a good match for me. It's a good fit for us, because I want to continually innovate and try to create things too. You know?
Let's talk.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the work you're doing now, the work that you are producing for you as a clown, as opposed to you as a facilitator or a teacher or a producer of other people's work. Let's talk about your work as a clown.
Well, let's see. Like you're saying, I did a lot of work recently where I was teaching or directing other people. I just directed April Deutschley's one-woman clown show called Stage Meet. And I just finished working with Derek Gilday, but we're co-collaborators, so that is my work also, The Young Matador. And I started to develop something with my wife, who's also a clown and a performer, Danielle Conover, and we created this show just before Trump was president called The Normans. And we were sort of like tyrannical one-percenter, like super elitist people in these giant high-rise buildings that, like, basically the comedy was all created from us sort of like trying to keep the other people out of our giant shining towers, and just a satire of the 1% basically. And that's in development. We started working on that, did a couple of performances, went back, did some rewrites. I'm working with Stephen Trito, who was also at the Experimental Performance Institute with us, and we created a clown punk rock band. And so we're developing something where we want to have music but also have it be a clown-based performance. And then I'm doing that show with Derek Gilday, and so all of us were talking and getting together, and we're going to form a theater company called Teatro Gustafino. And so look for more shows. There'll be a whole bunch because we have a ton in the works.
What is integral to the work of a clown? What separates clown from other art forms? What makes clown?
Well, I think it's my personal belief that clown is a verb. It's not a thing. Like, I need to find my inner clown. Like, you're a performer. Clown is like a lens that you look at performance through, and it, in the territory of clown, as I was taught to understand it, very specific things apply. You can see the audience can see you, you're in the same room, you're super live with them. Your job is to create a kind of complicity with the audience. And it's also the same, you know, when you go into a hospital room, you're trying to find the game. What's the game? What's the game between me and this person? What's going to drive this, like, partially improvised interaction? You know, that's another hallmark of clown. But the more I study acting, the more I discover that it's as much improvised. Usually, sometimes being in plays and having lines and dialogue-driven performance. Sometimes like, oh, I don't want to do that because I don't want to do dialogue-driven performance. But the more that I watch and study acting classes and get to participate, the more I come to understand it's really similar in the sense that there's a framework, and then you're improvising within this framework, and it's just a different kind of framework for clown, you know? And there's the whole thing about, like, all of the ideas that people put on a clown, like what a clown is. But I mean, Borat is a clown.
Absolutely.
You know, I think that
he's horrible.
He's clowning humans. You know.
He's a buffoon. I mean,
yeah.
Buffoon.
Oh yeah.
If you look at, like, when Dolores Leonard came and taught us when I was in clown school about Buffoon, she said it's about. I'm paraphrasing because it's been 10 years.
Yeah.
But she said it's about finding your ugliness, the part of you that you can't stand, and embracing that and putting that forward as character.
I think that's clown. I even think that's clown.
I mean, and that's inherent to what I do as a clown. You know,
yeah.
With my physicality and how, like, the main act I do right now is a burlesque act, but that is purely about sexuality. That act, and it's also about being a fat naked guy on stage, dancing. And so
that should be the name of your one-man show.
Fat naked guy.
If you want to sell tickets, you call your one-man show "Fat Naked Guy on Stage," and people will just come there because it's so self-effacing and lends itself to humor right away.
Dolores, so your the ugly parts of you.
Yeah.
And I think that is a big part of what Buffoon is. And Buffoon, as it's interpreted in San Francisco, seems to be about something like that. I see how they make their characters and how they do their physicality. I've not taken any Buffoon classes because the Buffoon people here in town and I don't really click.
Man,
but
there's well, I mean, there's Naked Empire. They do a lot of really great Buffoon work, and you know, that whole territory comes from Lecoq's work, and looking at that territory like as a separate thing from clown is like a fun thing that I like to do sometimes, and go, okay, it's not clown. They have cross things where they meld into each other and they share some similarities, but people that really are into doing Buffoon want to explore it as its own defined territory, just as theater practitioners. You know, I respect that. I like it. I like that my world of clown, like what I think of clown, includes all of that stuff. That's part of what I think is cool about clown. And in Lecoq's book, like the very last, like I think there's like 4 pages or something dedicated to Buffoon. Like it's barely explored. That's why it's so exciting that there's a company in town that loves to do that work. But one of the things I really like to see in that kind of satire, like one way that people do Buffoon, where the Buffoon is misshapen and padded and grotesque, but in other ways you can also show someone who's grotesque in a different way. What if their grotesquerie is on the inside, or it's manifested just slightly different, so that they don't all start to look like, I can't do a show unless I stuff things in my clothes.
And maybe that, to me, is the differentiation between clown and Buffoon, because I think being grotesque on the inside and projecting that outward is not an ignoble trait. That there is nobility in that. There is vulnerability in that, and vulnerability is what all clown is about.
Yeah. Well, like it's like the you know, the old adage, the clown falls down so you don't have to. You know, if you show your nastiness, or it's one of my favorite clown exercises is to have people go to the mirror and look in the mirror, stand a distance away from the mirror, just far enough away where it feels like it's someone else, where it's not you. You know, it's like the distance you would stand from a stranger. Go up to a full-length mirror, and I turn off all the lights so they can't really see, and then I have them just begin a dialogue with that shadow person, that shadow self, and they end up calling that person all the names that are based on, like, what's the thing about you that you don't really like or you might want to change, and then they define what that is. It gets really clear because they're getting in an argument with themselves, and then I take that and have them make fun of it. Now I want you to twist it around and make fun of that. Like, how do you celebrate your foibles? I mean, come on, the clowns are just doing that. I mean, as soon as there was enough people hanging out together where there was like some kind of society, even primitive society, there were people holding a yardstick up to that and going like, Bob is such a jerk. What? Look what Bob did. It's so funny. Let's laugh at him. Oh, let's all laugh at ourselves. We're all stupid, you know?
Well, there's the dividing line. It's right there. There's the dividing line. Let's laugh at him. Let's laugh at ourselves. My interpretation of clown, based on, you know, my limited and sketchy reading of social anthropology, is that humor. God, it's so hard to put without sounding like a complete jackass. But I'll just sound like a jackass. We separate ourselves from the tribe. We put ourselves on the outside. We make ourselves the outcasts from the tribe, and that brings the tribe together to laugh at us and creates a sense of unity between the people laughing at us. Laughing is the baring of teeth and barking. That's what it is. Smiling is baring teeth. Laughing is barking. It's how you warn someone that they have transgressed against taboo and they will not be allowed to continue being part of the tribe.
Clowns define where the line is.
And then
they show where the line is, you know?
We say, I've done this taboo thing, laugh at me, come together. But hey, look, here's how we're all doing this taboo thing. So not only do you feel stronger as a group laughing at me, now I can also make you feel stronger about this fear, because I'm showing you in doing this. I'm showing you how this isn't a thing to be afraid of. So it's creating strength and unity on 2 different levels by choosing to be, you know, some kind of social martyr and pushing yourself on the outskirts. You know, you are our society's leper. In that moment, bringing this tribe together to bring derision upon yourself, and then turn that derision so they can see
Right.
how foolish derision itself is.
You celebrate it. You sort of, it's not a drama, right? That's the thing you have to tell clown students a lot when they start to explore emotions and trying to find out how you can make an emotion funny. Like, where do you have to sit in your mind where essentially laughter's corrective? It's corrective. You and I run up the stairs, you slip and fall, and I go, oh man, let me help you, Abraham. We both laugh because we know you're not supposed to fall down when you run up the stairs. There's a beautiful, beautiful book that came out in like 1914 by this guy named Henri Bergson. It's called Laughter, an essay on the meaning of the comic. And it's a guy that would just point his analytical lens at different things, birds, butterflies, the weather, different things. And he wrote a book about laughter, and it's beautiful. Part of it is all about how laughter's corrective, that essentially that's its function in society. So it's kind of like you're saying, it's like a warning, a bit of a warning. I mean, it's kind of like the canary in the coal mine, like the foolish gesture. Oh, look, he's such a dumb jerk. Oh, wait, he has the real information. He's the one that knew all along the kingdom was falling apart. I think all of those, and you know, that's the shamanic origin of clown. That's the real function in society, and it's one of the reasons that people don't like clowns, and it's one of the reasons that people, I think anyway, that people are afraid of clowns. The clown's going to bring you, first of all, the clown's not going to ignore you, so you can't just like function, you can't just like do whatever you want. The clown should create a game with you, and so that there's consent in the game with you and the clown, right? A lot of times there's not with clowns that are like outside on the street or something, or mimes. That's one of the reasons people don't like them. Another reason is because they feign innocence. If you have fake innocence, like I'm innocent little, then people don't like you because you're saying that existence is vapid, and so people get angry.
Well, clowns, this is something Jeff and I talked about, is that there's a point like around the 50s or 60s where clowns become saccharine, and people lash back against that, and that's when you get your clowns with a K.
Yeah, the
not your clowns with a K, but the general clowns with a K.
Like a twee thing. And people always say that they're afraid of clowns, and I think they ought to be. I always say that they should be afraid of clowns. You should be afraid of clowns. Clowns are, the nature of a clown is to just to upend whatever's supposed to be happening in a room. So if I own a china shop, I'm really afraid of clowns. I'm not hiring clowns to do any of my housework. I don't want them in my kitchen or my bedroom, you know.
I love them in my bedroom personally, but that's me. I'm a big fan
There's
of
a
clowns
club for people like that in New York, you know.
I did not know that.
There is.
Henri Bergson.
Yes.
Mime School. What are the media? What are the movies, TV shows, music, other clowns, theater? What are the things that influenced you becoming a clown and to this day?
When I first started to study, I have to say my first clown teacher was Joel Jusky, because I had studied mime and physical theater, and he had this show with De Hansfurst where he was this amazing clown named Kam Oost. That was his name. And I didn't realize how they were working it. Like, the program and everything was a ruse. And like it would say directed by Joseph Veit, which like Conrad Veidt is like an old famous director, or maybe they even just used the guy's straight up real name, and they just made it seem like this is a German thing. And when I was first working with him, the kind of exercises that we did to understand the world of clown, we created a persona that wasn't you, and you had to have a completely foolproof backstory for it. So my persona was Friedrich Oper. And Oost and Oper were in a show together, but Oper was tyrannical to Oost and would wake him up. Like, he would tell Oost to wake him up at 6 a.m. and he would set his alarm for 5:30 so he could wake up and beat Oost for not waking him up. Like that kind of like almost like a Bert and Ernie universe. And we did a lot of reading, a lot of watching, you know, all this kind of things that you would watch, all the Keaton and Chaplin, and we really got into German Expressionism, and that was a huge part of our show, and it tinged all the stuff I've ever made after that. Like, that whole thing just stays in there, that weird thing of German Expressionism.
You've done, I think, for years probably, but piece with Umbrella and Suitcase. And your physical clown, the way your aesthetic, both your aesthetic as that clown and that act itself, I can definitely see, you know, hints of that in that piece.
Yeah, I start to feel like that. It's really big in the Normans and in the Kaput. The Kaput clowns are like a celebration of the Koshari, the Native American clowns from the Hopi and Zuni tribes that were heavy satirists, really hardcore satirists, almost the police for their society, by calling people out and making fun of them for certain things, being very corrective. The Normans has a bit of that, like German Expressionism. But Joel and I used to read these books, like we read Heinrich Ball's book, The Clown, where a man who's a clown is going through his life. He's really broke. He's trying to stay alive, and he never has any money, but he has just enough money to buy tobacco and coffee and fresh flowers, and he always does that. And there's just like this way about that book. Also, for the play, we also had to read Günter Grass's book, The Tin Drum, about the little boy that beats the drum until the drum rips apart, and then they give him another drum and he beats the drum. And it's basically a story about like an alarm, basically about Nazism about to erupt in Europe. And those stories kind of flavored it. We did a lot of like background work. I'm a big fan of like when you're working on a show, like for the Young Matador with Derek, we watched all these bullfights and, saw this whole thing. And then I had conversations with Stephen Trito about the connection between bullfighting and fascism. And there's a huge like connection, so that we try to thread that in really subtly in our show, so that because I play a man who's simultaneously the bull and the man who's training the man to fight the bull. So it's got kind of a Mr. Miyagi kind of angle, a guy training a matador who's in full matador costume in his cafe with plates and spoons and things, and creating the whole world of the arena of bullfighting. But yeah, I'm a big fan of that, like finding books that really make it a deeper thing, like to create a persona that you inhabit that is fed by you, but it isn't you, and it isn't a twee sort of light representation. I mean, someone else can be like Bubbles the Clown. They can do that. I'm stoked for them. I don't want to make that kind of work, so I make a different kind of work. But I'm trying to look for those deep sources, Like we spent a bunch of time out on the reservation in the Hopi and Zuni tribe, talking to people about clown, and I was out there touring a more Western sort of clown show, like a European style clown show, and a little kid came up to me one day and he's like, "You're a crow," and I was like, "What?" And I thought, oh, he's telling me this like cool, Native American story about the crow. But he was saying, "You look like the Crow from the movie The Crow." And I was like, oh, weird. But then when we would break down in our car on tour, if we had the makeup on, they would help us. And if we didn't, they would not help us. They would pass us by, and we were stuck in the snow, and they wouldn't help us. But when we had the makeup on, they got horses and came and pulled our car out of the snow, because clowns are sacred, and they started giving us food. I was like, what's going on? So I picked up all these books about the Koshari, which was their clowns that I think they even still have. It used to be a secret society. No one knew you were one of the Koshari, so that you could make fun of other people. And when the Kachinas would come, the Koshari would come and crawl over the housetops and fall into the town square before heralding the Kachinas coming. And then they would play tug of war with their penises and do all kinds of totally taboo stuff and make fun of different things. Like they have a clown called White Lady, where they're like a white lady with a purse and a cell phone, and like, just like.
So did you get to work with other Native American clowns?
No, it's secret. You can't. It's like they still have the Koshari sometimes come out for certain celebrations, but we just got to talk to people about what they had seen and like what it meant to them, how it worked in their culture and their community. So pretty fun. That was when Steve Chips and I started working on that, because we had created a lot of work before that together, and then we created Kaput. We toured that for 10 years, forever.
So completely changing the topic.
Do it.
What is?
I'm gonna eat this nut online.
As a clown, what is the weirdest gig you've ever done, or one of the weirdest gigs you've ever done?
Well, I mean, everybody does a lot of weird gigs when you're doing like gigs, like strolling gigs and stuff like that. I did a lot of strolling gigs, but then quickly took control of like what was going to happen, so I could do my work in the theater and be paid. You know, I want to perform in a theater and actually be presented and get paid, which is harder and harder to do in America as we continue to decline. But that's a different story. The weirdest gig I ever had as a clown, it was here. It was not that long ago. It was here. The weirdest gig I ever had as a clown was dressing up like Friedrich Oper, like in the like a tux and a tailcoat and bald shaved head, like really like German expressionist clown, and working a gig here in town. And my partner for the gig was Amelia Van Brunt, and we had worked together some before, so we knew each other. And she was dressed up kind of like I think like a bunny, like a rabbit. So I looked like a magician and she looked like a rabbit. And we were doing this gig. And at one point in the evening, we had to be up on top of this big pillar. And I spent a good 20 minutes. She was on all fours and I was sitting on her back, smacking her on the butt as people walked by. And that was the craziest thing ever. It was hilarious. And we were just like, this is our job right now. Like, that's nuts.
If I'm remembering correctly, and this is not wouldn't be a weirdest gig, but didn't you and Danielle come do a gig for me once where you dressed up as animals? Like Danielle was in my ladybug costume, and
oh wait,
yeah,
I was dressed
like
as something. Yeah, we did
like
some
bugs or
weird
animals.
gig in like with Molly.
Yeah, Molly and
Shannon,
and a couple
from
other
the
people.
old Clown Conservatory.
Yeah, because I have
And
a bunch
Luce.
of animal costumes.
Yeah, that was a weird.
Were you
gig
the
too.
spider?
I don't know. I think I had more free movement than that.
It was very much a typical walk around,
Like
clown
a gig walk
We're
around.
just like, okay, we need everyone themed in this kind of costuming, and just do walk around, and it was, you know.
It's crazy because there's like a line that gets blurred, like what is clown and what isn't clown, and I think when you're doing a walk around act, if it's interactive, you're partially functioning as a clown because you're going to create games to like talk to people, and you're going to be chatting people up, and like you got to have some game. If you don't have game,
Well, and that's the thing is, I
you
don't
won't be
book,
doing anything.
I don't book clowns to do walk around.
Right.
No one wants a clown to come
An
to their
actual
party.
clown, right?
They want. I will book clowns to juggle. I'll
Yeah.
book clowns to be, you know, unicycle riders or jugglers or stilt walkers or
Yeah,
any
yeah.
number of other things. But no one wants to hire a clown
Just to walk
for their
around. They don't
event.
want to, yeah. I think that a clown, you know, the same thing happened to mimes, because in the 70s, mimes were bugging everyone on the street. Everybody was like, I'm a mime now, and they just put mime makeup on. In Boston, it was happening a lot. They had all these street mimes. And the mimes eventually started to drive people nuts, being really twee and, like, annoying on the street. And so people were like, ugh, I hate mimes. And then all these comedians were making all these jokes about how they hated mimes. And it was in fashion. It was actually fashionable to hate mimes.
Much
Then it
like
became
it's fashionable to be afraid of clowns.
Totally, it's totally fashionable right now. And, you know, if you did a poll of like a bunch of college students, a bunch of them would say they're afraid of clowns because it's cool to be afraid of clowns. They think that it's an interesting thing.
Well, I'm not.
But they don't really, you know what it is because they grew up in a country where the most dominant clown is a burger salesman,
And that's.
and he's kind of
so
terrifying.
There's so little representation of what clown is
Right.
in any form
Right.
in our society. We just have the
That's-
cartoon image
yeah.
of the white-faced grotesque
Yeah.
that came out of Ringling. I mean that they combined
Circus,
They
yeah.
combined European Auguste and European whiteface together to make the white-faced grotesque, which hadn't existed before American Circus. But I mean, Circus started in America essentially. It started in Europe with Astley's, but within 7 years, it was a huge part
Yeah, it
of
was
Americana.
a big thing. And that, you know, the makeup and all that stuff is for the scale of performance that they're doing. There's
And that's
poorly
Ringling's fault,
lit
too.
and really far away.
That's Ringling's fault because they went from a one-ring circus to a three-ring circus that holds 10,000 people, and the clowns couldn't talk anymore, and so they had to change.
Interesting.
And he straight up said, "You don't talk anymore. You just do visual gags." And that's when we went from being Jon Stewart's to being Bozo.
Yeah.
And things had to change, but at least they were still pulling on, you know, these European traditions of entree that had been around with these clown characters for
Right.
centuries, going back to Del Arte, I mean, the actual
Yeah, the Commedia dell'arte. It's fun to think. I mean, that's why it's really useful, I think, for people to become a little bit. I mean, as a theater community, all of the U.S. as one big theater community, people are starting to recognize that the same old like play that comes off perfectly without a hitch, and it's exactly this one way, and it never delineates from this thing. They're not selling any tickets. There's a wonderful book that just came out called Theater of the Unimpressed, and it's a book written by a person that runs a space up in Montreal called Video Fag, and it's about theater that just has no failure built into it. And clown is the antithesis to this thing. It's like perfect. Like, well, you want to have theater.
That's at its core is failure.
Yeah, you want to have theater that like anything could happen. And I'm bored of any kind of public performance that isn't actually live. Meaning, there's an idea of how it's supposed to be, but things could happen. And if those things aren't allowed to happen, then the audience is like, why would you compete with television? You're just not even understanding the medium that you're working in, that it's live. Things need to happen. There's a bunch of great shows. There's a show with a man that just came to Counterpulse that's totally live, and it's created. The audience does things live to a man who's in a panda suit, and they discover they do all these different things to the person, I think, from these prompts, and then they discover the person's race. They don't know what the person's race is at the beginning, so they don't know the gender of the person. They're treating them all these ways, and then they unsuit them as part of the public display and realize, their own kind of foibles about their own behavior, which I think is a beautiful idea. There's another play where it's 12 hours long, and there's a giant feast on stage and a bunch of actors with cardboard crowns on, and people come in, and you're allowed to come and go because it's 12 hours long. You might go home and take a nap and come back and watch some more of it. And the people on stage are eating a feast, and as they eat the feast, other actors come in and other actors leave, and there's no script. So these kings and queens and all these people around this giant feast just create a play. They just start speaking and make this play, and it ends up being a lot of storytelling. It ends up being a lot of personal storytelling about the people. And I would love to see more theater like that.
I'd love to be involved in theater like that.
Yeah.
Well, we're just about out of time. Dan, what's going on with you right now? Where can people find your work? Where should they look for you?
Well, I just started an entity here in San Francisco called Clown Lab to kind of house all my classes, because I regularly teach classes in mime and clown and physical theater. And right now I'm teaching those classes out of Zacco Studios over in the Bayview on Yosemite, I think it is. You can check out all my class offerings. I'm getting ready to teach July 1st. I'm teaching a workshop in England, and then the following weekend I'm teaching a workshop in Belgium. That are weekend workshops, 2-day workshops, 12 hours of study. I have one of those coming up in San Francisco, the 10th and 11th of June. I have a weekend workshop here at Zacco Studios. You can check all that stuff out at my website at dangriffiths.us.
Wonderful, Dan. And one last thing before we go. If you could tag any 3 other clowns that you think should be on the podcast, who would they be?
Oh, man. Well, there are so many. I think that you should talk to Amelia Van Brunt, because she's one of the young women in town that's doing clown.
I believe Natasha tagged her last week as well.
Yeah, so and you could talk to Wendy Winaz. You could talk to David and Amika. Sophia is here in town. Cara Sue is here. And they have a show. Cara Sue and Sophia have a show, but then also Cara Sue has a show with Sabrina Wensky. They're all, the West Coast right now, because of the Del Arte School and also Clown Conservatory, it's reaching a critical mass of physical theater performers. So just be aware. There's going to be so much work that pops up like in the next 10 years out here.
All right, well, Dan, thank you very much.
Yeah, man.
For coming and joining us
Thank
today.
you, Abraham.
And everyone will put a link to the website in the description for the podcast. Thank you for listening, ladies and gentlemen. If you'd like to hear more, you can find more of our programs at www.picklewater.com. To support us on Patreon, please go to www.dungeonsandpeppers.com. Theme song by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech Music.